Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar, Automating Your Customs Process, a first principle look at customs management. So my name is Grant Cernick, and I am the head of sales and marketing for Third Wave. This is a redux of a presentation that I gave at ICPA 2024 that was very well attended with great feedback. It was kind of oversubscribed, and so we thought we would record it for the general population, and hopefully you enjoy it. So we are going to start with a little comic, Dilbert. Um, and I think that this probably resonates with many of you. Um, data is sort of like a finicky thing, and it's very hard in instances to know whether data is right and accurate. Um, our job as compliance professionals is to ensure that this kind of scenario doesn't actually happen, right? That the data that we are responsible for has to be submitted not just accurately but explicitly to customs, and we have to be able um, to confirm and make it clear how we came to the answer that we got by showing our work. And so this is in the compliance world a very challenging task. So today we're going to quickly touch on what are the goals of customs compliance, why customs compliance is challenging. We'll talk a little bit about control and what control is, and a little bit about what the role of the customs broker is and what they do, what the actual work is that they do. And finally, we're going to talk about why you want to automate. So, what is the goal of customs compliance? Well, this is a non-technical definition that I came up with, but I think it does a pretty good job of defining what we are shooting for. So, our job is to ensure that the information that we file with the customs authority, so CBP in the US, is done timely, correctly, it's done explicitly, and most importantly, it is done consistently. So this is really important because if you have a customs entry that is done timely and correctly and explicitly most of the time, that isn't actually good enough. We need to do it every time a shipment is imported, or our goal needs to be that every time a shipment is imported, we do things timely, correctly, and explicitly. And so that level of consistency is something that makes this task more complex. So, in order to do this, we have to have a very good understanding of what the regulations are and related customs rulings. We need to be able to ensure that the products have the appropriate HTS classifications against them, and not just HTS classifications. In fact, you need PGA information. There's other data that is really important as it relates to your customs product or your products from a customs perspective. So could be things related to anti-dumping or countervailing duties. There's a whole host of additional data that's more complex than just the standard customs, HTS, country of origin, and so on. And we have to have a very, very good control of that. We need to make sure that the documentation that we have is complete, so that we have all of the documentation, that we have it on file. We have to be able to reference it, because we have to prepare ourselves for the eventuality when customs or a PGA is going to come knocking and ask for the supporting documentation. We want to make sure that every time entry is being created and filed, that you have all of the documentation required to support that. And finally, we have an obligation to oversee the process of customs, the holistic process, which means that you are likely using a customs broker, and that data and information is going to be transmitted from you to them. They're going to do some work and submit that with customs. And now your job is to ensure they've done their work, and that what customs has on file that you can access via the ACE portal actually reflects what you expected your customs profile on your behalf. This is challenging, obviously, because they're doing some work. And we're going to get into that and what exactly they're doing, and being clear that you understand what the work is that they've done, and that you're on top of it and ensuring that they've done that work accurately is about process oversight. And that's actually a challenge, and largely you meet that challenge by audit, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. So what is your challenge as a importer, as a trade compliance professional that does import? Well, you'll probably recognize this as a simplified commercial invoice. So it has a part number on it with some quantities and pricing information. And your job is to convert or ensure that your customs broker is converting this information into the language and format that customs, CBP, understands. This is the most simple example I could give. So you have your commercial invoice on the left side, and you have the equivalent customs perspective or customs entry on the right side. And the question is the information on the right side equivalent to the information on the left side, or is the customs data equivalent to the commercial invoice data? And what you're going to note that there is not one single data element on the right that allows you to get back to the information on the left, or vice versa. You can't get from the commercial invoice to the entry, or the entry to the commercial invoice. There is no way you can do that with just this information available to you. So how do you know that the broker has done their job properly? This is the challenge that you face, right? It's not obvious. It's very, very difficult, in fact. So when we look at our day and the challenges that go against that problem in particular, what challenges do you face? Okay, because there are a whole host of them. It might be just getting from a commercial invoice to a customs entry, but more likely your symptoms or the things that you experience in your daily life fall into something else. It could be a reconciliation program. It could be you don't sleep at night because you're concerned about anti-dumping or countervailing duties, and that you're not managing it in an appropriate way to ensure that you don't have a massive fine as you go forward, or you make a mistake. It could be an operational problem where you're not sure that entries are being filed on time, or you are sure that they're not being filed on time, which causes delays at the port. It could be something around rulings and your cross rulings, and are you applying them appropriately and managing them? It could be assists. Could be about just the classification of product. You have hundreds of thousands of parts perhaps, and how do you classify them and how do you manage them? And probably one that many of you are facing almost certainly is that you have spreadsheets, and spreadsheets are crazy large. You have many of them, and they're not designed appropriately to share with other parties, including your customs broker. These are all different problems. There are many, many more that exist. All of these challenges are related specifically to the challenge that we just looked at, which is how do you convert your trade data into customs language, and ensuring that that's done in a consistent manner real time. So the challenges that we just saw in that word cloud generally fall into one of three categories. first is capturing and controlling data. So how do you get your HTS codes and ensure that the data related to the product is centralized and controlled such that you understand a certain set of things? There are challenges related to operational process or process control. So maybe things like ensuring that your customs entries and ISFs are filed timely, because you have to be able to manage those and submit the data in a timely fashion. You have information that changes in time. So a reconciliation program is something like that. You have audit and communicating with brokers. These are all things that relate to your operational process. And one of the challenges of being consistent time and time again is ensuring that you're able to manage that operational process in a manner that is controlled. And then the final category that the challenges tend to fall into is technology and having a technology backbone to support the activities that you require for your customs operation. So one to note is that many of you use ERPs to try and manage some of the information that is required to be managed. Generally speaking, it's an HTS code. But let's be honest, the ERP is not designed to handle all of the customs and trade data. And in fact, most people don't quite get it that the ERP generally is silent on just about everything that goes into the transportation and trade compliance process. An ERP touches the world when a purchase order is issued, and generally doesn't touch the world again until a warehouse receipt is issued and consumed. And trade compliance exists in between those 2 points. And so you need a different technology to support the activities of international transportation compliance. And it's not the ERP. Certainly it's not the ERP. Now, you might be sitting there and saying, yeah, but what about SAP GTS, which is, for those of you who are not SAP shops, Global Trade Services. It's an SAP application. Or if you're an Oracle shop, what about Oracle GTM, which is their global trade management application? And my response to that is, yeah, those are applications that the major ERP providers have, but they are not the ERP. They're an add-on to the ERP, and they were third-party developed software that those companies have bought. So whether you're going to buy one of the solutions from your ERP provider or buy a third-party GTM solution, the challenge that you need to deal with needs to be solved by a GTM solution. The ERP is not the appropriate technology tool to use. And if you are trying to customize your ERP to solve some of these problems, you are going to run into a very expensive solution that doesn't solve the problems that you think it ought to solve. So coming back to data control, operational control, and technology, these are generally the 3 categories where these problems fall into. And we're going to talk about how when you have the ability to control data and the ability to control your operational processes and the ability and technology to support these 2 activities, what you end up with is control. Process control, data control, document control, all of these things come together, and it is control that you are looking for when you are talking about your trade process. Okay. At the ICPA conference this year, I had another discussion another session called Freak and Control Control Freaks, which really is it's one of our taglines, but it's really sort of aimed exactly at these trade compliance, you guys who are the trade compliance professionals that understand control, right? You guys as a general attribute, I would say across sort of a wide swath of you would be these type A control freak type people. And what you're looking for is help in understanding what needs to be done and gaining the control of your process to allow you to sleep well at night and operate with less stress. So when we're talking about automating customs process, what we are really talking about is gaining control of your customs process, because that is a prerequisite for automation. So automation requires control. So let's talk a little bit for a moment about what customs brokers do, and we're going to bring that back to what it means for control of your process. So activities that customs brokers take on are transformations. So they transform your data. They use lookups. So if they're transforming a product, a SKU number into an HTS code, they're then going to use that HTS code to look up a whole host of data. They're then going to convert and do some calculations. And finally, they're going to sum a whole bunch of data elements up. And in doing these activities, we get the obscuring of data and information from information that we're comfortable and we understand and we have documentation for, which is largely the commercial invoice, the packing list, and the bill of lading. So the activities that the customs brokers do are fighting against the control that we require in order to automate a process. Because everything here is done off system, and maybe the broker has their own system, they likely do, but it's not your system and you don't have access to it. So as far as you're concerned, and your obligation or your requirements for moving your process forward to get towards automation, which requires control, your broker, generally speaking, is working against those interests. It's not their fault. This is not a blame game. The nature of the process. If you're sending your information to a customs broker and getting them to do work, this is the nature of what a customs broker is. They are doing work off system, which is fighting against control, which is fighting against your ability to automate, which means you have to first understand that this is happening and then set in place a certain set of things to not necessarily stop it, but to control what is happening and the work that they do, such that they're working with you as opposed to against you. So from a process perspective, let's just take a look at what's happening. So we're all familiar with the top lane. Those are your forwarders. They have a document packet. It's a bill of lading, a packing list, a commercial invoice. These three documents are pervasive in the international trade world. And somehow you're supposed to get from, or your broker gets from, these three documents to a customs entry. And this is what the process looks like. So you have those documents get sent to your customs broker. The customs broker goes through this black box process, which you don't have any visibility to. Part of this is this product dictionary, which is a shared product dictionary with you, the IOR. And they are going to then create a customs entry. And this is a simplified sort of diagram. It's really an ISF, a customs entry, and the PGA data that goes with it. And they're going to submit that to ACE. Now, they also provide you with that customs entry. And now you have a job, which is to deal with an audit or ensuring that they've done the work appropriately well. And so you're going to do an audit. And the audit means the verification of all of the data from the customs entry to the product dictionary to your documents that are held in a SharePoint repository or something like that. And you're going to do this for a subset of entries. Now, let's be clear as to what we're doing. In the audit, you are going to take a subset of total entries filed. And then from that subset of entries filed, you are going to take a subset of data elements that you think are most important. and you're going to ensure that the conversions and the lookups and the calculations and all of these things, the transformations that your customs broker does, were done correctly. And if you find discrepancies, then that suggests broader systematic challenges, and you have to then take corrective action with your broker to ensure that these systematic challenges get resolved and rectified in time. So what's going on in this black box here that the customs broker is doing? What is going on here? What are they doing? So let's take a look, and we're going to use this example that we've already touched on earlier in a couple slides ago. We're going to start with a commercial invoice. This is what they have, and we're going to see how that translates from the commercial invoice and the part numbers. So here we have 4 different part numbers on this commercial invoice, and they get translated into the language that customs understands, the language of the tariff schedule, into HTS codes. Okay, now you, as the trade compliance professional, likely control the classifications of your products. You do this for 2 reasons. One, it's the obligation that customs puts on you, but also because you know your products best, and it's not always obvious how you convert a product into an HTS code, and your broker is not the best position to necessarily achieve that. When the HTS code has been determined, you're now able to look up a number of different data points from the tariff schedule. So in this instance, this HTS code has a duty rate of 2%. It has a flag for FDA, and its report units are dozens. Again, this is all highly simplified. The data tends to be more complex than this. But just keeping this simplified data, the broker now is going to do a bunch of conversions and calculations. It's going to convert from quantities in eaches to dozens. It's going to calculate MTF and HMF. It's going to calculate the duties that have to be paid. Okay, so all of these calculations are being done in this black box off system as far as you're concerned. And they're going to get to a point that looks like this, where now you have your parts, and you have your the broker is now going to organize the parts on this commercial invoice by HTS code. They're going to aggregate the like HTS codes together, because you typically pay based on the number of lines on an entry, and your job is to minimize the amount that you pay per entry. So you're going to require, generally speaking, whether it's stated or unstated, that your broker consolidates lines on a customs entry. And finally, you're going to get to the final output, which is the table on the right. So we're back to the slide we had before. We had the commercial invoice on the left, we have the customs entry on the right, and that question mark is put on this equal or not equal. We don't know. Are they equal or not? And it's not clear. Basically, the equal sign is a black box. You've gone through a black box process to get from point A to point B. So you don't know. So not knowing whether it's right or not causes some pretty significant problems. It creates work. So you have audit to do. And the work that it creates is not particularly self-actualizing work. People tend not to do this kind of work, so it creates lots of work. Some companies, especially the bigger ones, have teams where all they do are audit the entries. It creates risk for your organization. That notwithstanding you audit, you're probably not sufficiently auditing or auditing as much as you ought to be. And that you can't be certain that you're selecting the entries that have errors or mistakes. It creates uncertainty. You don't have visibility to the process of how the entry is made, but you also don't have visibility to the operational process to understand from a timing perspective, are things being done on time? Are you being made aware that a shipment is being held for some reason, maybe for inspection or any other reason? Are you being informed contemporaneously, or is there a delay there, which is adding to even more delay because you can't deal with it if there's a inspection or it's being held? You want to deal with that as quickly as you can. It creates cost for your organization. On average, for an ocean or air shipment, you're going to be paying $100 to $150 for an entry. Of course, there are people that are paying less than that, but it's not much less than that, and it's by volume. And so, if you're a company that's doing between 1,000 and 10,000 or 15,000 entries, the odds that you're much less than $100 per entry and $25 to $35 for an ISF is monthly. So there's cost associated with that. We've spoken a lot about operational process, but in particular, the integration of the operational process into your broader supply chain process isn't there. It's just totally disconnected. And finally, penalties are starting to be incurred for many companies, especially as it relates now for ISFs. So notwithstanding all the other things that go against the entry and being wrong entry and penalties for misfiling, anti-dumping, or not appropriately applying HTS codes and things of that nature, you have new incrementing penalties for things like ISFs, which are starting to be a big problem. So why do you want to automate? Well, it should be really simple that automation helps create controlled process, controlled data, and controlled documents. But it also reduces the workload and it increases your capacity. Now, you might be working with these unicorn companies for a unicorn department where you're in trade or managing a trade group and things seem to be going swimmingly well. But for the vast majority of you, you are overworked. You have too much stuff to do. The demands that are being placed on your organization are way more than what you have. If your company is growing, that just means more responsibility and everything like that. Automation allows you to do less of that tedious work. It allows you to do less audit. It allows you to have less general oversight of an uncontrolled process, which allows more time for training, more time for working with your stakeholders, which is one of the key places you can do it, or you can make a difference, and more time to evolve your compliance processes to continually improve in time and make everybody's life better. It allows you to reduce cost. So automation, if you were able to control your process and then automate the creation of a customs entry or customs entry data that you can now provide to your customs broker, where you are doing the conversion within your organization, meaning that all of the black box work that your broker otherwise had to do, you can do. And when I say you, I don't mean you're actually doing the calculations and the transformations. Systematically, you are auditing the conversion of your operational data into trade compliance data or your customs data. You can now send that to your broker because they don't have to do all the black box work. they will now reduce your fee for filing, and it should be by at least 50%. I want you to think about that. If today you are filing 1,000 entries and it's on average costing you $100,000 to run your entries through a broker, by automating, you should be able to reduce that from 100,000 to 50,000. If you are filing 5,000 entries, that means you are going from $500,000 a year in brokerage fees to $250,000 in brokerage fees. There are not many things that you can do within the trade compliance world that will save your organization money. But automating your customs process is one of them. And in doing that, and in reducing your cost, you don't just save your company money, you make your life better by having better control of your data and better control of your processes and better documentation control. It reduces risk. It also allows you to have a validated data set, which is very, very important, both as it relates to eliminating the need for your broker to enter data, but more importantly provides one of the greatest views into your supply chain that you possibly could have. Okay, so this data, the validated data, understanding your data is very, very valuable to your organization and understanding what's going on in the supply chain. We've spoken a little bit about the reduction in risk. Your ability within your trade compliance organization to respond to CF28s and 29s, to systematically validate data through the process, to understanding dates and ensuring that ISFs are filed on time, entries for that matter, and ensuring consistency across every single entry is a whole boatload of risk reduction. I think this is finally, speed actually matters. At least it generally matters to most companies. So ensuring that all your data is centralized and validated ahead of time means that when your shipments get to the port of entry, they will not be held as frequently, and you will be able to save time on getting your goods through the border. If you are self-filing your entries, you get real-time response from customs as it relates to your entries and your PGA files, which means earlier if you are going to have a customs hold or a PGA hold, and earlier what needs to be done, and you could plan around that. To give you an example, ocean shipments, you're able to file your entries 5 days ahead of time. And typically you get the response virtually immediately from when you file, which means if the shipment is going to be held or not. Now you have 5 days to plan for that, and you also have 5 days to alert your stakeholders that this is going to happen and that you're going to be delayed. The other thing that you're able to manage is delivery and the pickup of your containers or shipments, and the delivery, whether it's to your customer or to a warehouse, can be scheduled well ahead of time. And the last point, and perhaps the most important point, is that in the trade compliance and customs management world, you gain control, which is one of the paramount thing that you are looking for. Control is why you're hired within your organization, is to control the customs process. So you gain control, and automating allows you to continually improve your process to go forward and deliver better results to your organization. So we're going to end it there. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, things that you'd like to discuss with me, or if you're interested further in Third Wave and how Third Wave helps with this, please drop me a line. I'm at grant@thirdwave.co. I'm also reasonably active on LinkedIn. I write reasonably frequently about challenges that importers face as it relates to customs and international transportation. And I would love a follow or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. So again, I'm really appreciative that you've joined us today. I'm looking forward to hearing from you and connecting with you. And if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to shoot them to me. Look forward to speaking with you. Have a great day, guys.